Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something pretty wild. Chapter 2 of Ryuho Okawa's Reptilian Strike Back 2. Now, whether you're a massive UFO enthusiast or you just really love alternative history, you're going to find this fascinating. The text offers this incredibly specific look at one extraterrestrial group, the Zeta B aliens. We're going to unpack their unique lore, right? Their origins, their really bizarre biology, and the profound impact the text claims they had on our own ancient human history. To set the stage, let's just ask a question that kind of flips traditional historical timelines on their head. Who really taught humanity the foundations of civilization? I mean, who brought us mathematics, engineered the very first pyramids, and honestly, who figured out the fermentation process to brew the very first beer? Usually we credit the slow, steady ingenuity of ancient humans in Mesopotamia, but the source text we're examining today throws a massive curveball. It proposes a radically unconventional claim that a huge portion of this early human leap in ancient Sumer was actually the result of direct alien intervention.
Okay, let's dive into this. Chapter 2 shifts our focus entirely to the Zeta B aliens, and the text makes it explicitly clear right from the jump that unlike all those popular sci-fi tropes of conquering invaders you see in movies, the Zeta B are a remarkably peaceful species. In fact, they fundamentally despise conflict. They're characterized as this highly cooperative, gentle society that was forced to flee their home. They didn't come as conquerors, they came as desperate refugees just looking for a quiet corner of the universe to simply exist in peace.
Section 1. Unique amphibious appearance.
So to really understand who they are, we have to look at their biology. And the details in the text are incredibly specific. The Zeta B are described as an amphibious species, totally capable of living both on land and underwater, complete with functional gills right near their necks. But maybe the craziest feature is their vision. They have 3 eyes, and that middle eye actually protrudes outward, almost like the lure on an anglerfish. The text explains this as an evolutionary trait tied directly to their timid, non-violent nature. Because they are so averse to conflict, this protruding eye acts like a little periscope. It gives them 360-degree vision so they can constantly be on the lookout for predators creeping up from any direction. Oh, and they don't really use spoken words, they communicate primarily through powerful telepathy.
Now just picture this for a second. Imagine being an early human, living in the ancient Tigris and Euphrates river valleys, and you encounter one of these beings. The text suggests that when the Zeta B aliens arrived, they naturally wanted to swim or bathe, right? So they would take off their protective spacesuits. Ancient humans, seeing these amphibious, multi-eyed beings emerging from the waters, understandably didn't think, oh hey, extraterrestrial visitors. Instead, they mistook them for literal river gods or divine aquatic creatures. It just provides such a fascinating alternative lens to view the origins of ancient Mesopotamian mythology.
Section 2. Escape to Earth.
So why did they leave their home in the first place? The text traces their origin point to a planet near the Zeta star, way out in the Magellanic Clouds. Despite having this peaceful, highly advanced society, their homeworld suffered a pretty catastrophic fate. They were invaded by aggressive, militaristic reptilian forces. Unable and completely unwilling to engage in a brutal war, their civilization was devastated, forcing the survivors into a desperate retreat across the cosmos. Let's move to and see how this built, because they didn't come to Earth directly. Fleeing the Magellanic Clouds, their first major retreat was actually to Nibiru. The text describes Nibiru as the 10th planet in our solar system, and at the time it was serving as a sort of frontline base. But they were still seeking a truly safe, permanent sanctuary way out of reach from their conquerors. So a faction of them continued their wandering journey until they eventually discovered Earth. It was a blue, water-rich planet that perfectly suited their amphibious biology and offered a real chance for a new, peaceful beginning. And it's really important to note that this wasn't some massive colonization fleet darkening the skies. The text describes their arrival as a very small, incredibly vulnerable refugee group. We're talking roughly 40 to 50 individuals total. They showed up in what's described as a glowing, silver and orange circular ship. They were just a shattered remnant of a once great civilization, landing quietly on Earth to rebuild their lives in absolute secrecy.
Section 3. Surprising gifts to humanity.
Once they settled in what would eventually become ancient Sumer, they didn't just hide. To really appreciate their actions on Earth, the text impartially asks us to contrast the Zeta B with their oppressors, the Reptilians. Where the text describes the Reptilians as highly violent, predatory, and even a man-eating species that viewed lesser beings as livestock, the Zeta B are framed as entirely benevolent. They are a species that deeply values the teachings of the mind, prioritizing spiritual and intellectual cooperation above all else. This stark contrast really highlights the incredibly gentle approach the Zeta B took when they began interacting with early humans.
According to the source, the cultural gifts they gave Earth were literally foundational to human civilization. In science, they introduced humanity to mathematics, which Zeta B considered the absolute basis for all scientific and technological advancement. In agriculture and daily life, they shared their knowledge of yeast and fermentation technologies. That means they are actually credited with teaching humanity how to bake leavened bread and brew beer. And over in architecture, they were the masterminds behind the construction of the massive ziggurats and pyramid-like structures of early antiquity.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the alleged purpose behind those architectural marvels. The text asserts that the ziggurats and early pyramids built in Sumer weren't merely tombs or monuments to human kings. From the perspective of the Zeta B, these massive, skyward-pointing structures were actually designed as vast facilities intended for interstellar communication. They were basically building ancient satellite dishes out of stone, attempting to cast their powerful telepathic signals out across space to connect with other lost peers or their distant home.
Section 4. Love, Mercy, and Strength.
As they integrated into Earth's history, their philosophy evolved. The Zeta B highly respected Earth as a planet that was progressing through those teachings of the mind. They held a deeply spiritual view that a society based purely on looking out for oneself is a society where, ultimately, no one is ever truly happy. They believed in collective well-being, empathy, and absolute pacifism. However, their tragic cosmic journey forced them to confront a really harsh reality about the universe.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core philosophical takeaway of Chapter 2. The Zeta B learned a painful existential lesson. Being completely nonviolent and relying solely on love and mercy actually made them incredibly vulnerable. Because they absolutely refused to fight back, their people were easily exploited, tortured, and enslaved by conquering species. They realized that their pure pacifism, without any ability to defend themselves, simply resulted in the suffering of their friends and peers.
Which leads us to a profound conclusion drawn directly from the text. Not only love and mercy, but a certain degree of strength is also necessary. This represents a massive evolution in the Zeta B's worldview. They didn't abandon their peaceful nature, but they realized that in a harsh, unpredictable universe, benevolence must be paired with the strength and resolve to actually protect that peace. Otherwise, it will simply be consumed by those who wield violence.
So, the crucial point we are left with goes far beyond just alien lore, and it touches on a very real human dilemma. As you reflect on the journey of the Zeta B, from their peaceful origins through their tragic exile to the foundational gifts they gave humanity, ask yourself, how do we balance a philosophy of peace with the strength required to protect it? It's a deeply provocative question that the source material leaves us pondering. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this deep dive into the text has sparked your curiosity to explore these ideas even further.